Hey, Mom, what's up with dinner? Finished cleaning yet? You better hurry up or Morgan will be back home. Kyle and Allison addressed me for the first time in months. In the cluttered living room, there I was, feeling under the weather. Something in me just snapped. Kyle and Allison, looking at my silence, laughed mockingly. I doubt I could ever forgive them, even if they apologized. To ensure they thoroughly reflected on their behavior, I decided to give them a taste of their own medicine, and then some. My name is Michelle, I'm 53. A housewife. I married Morgan, who is 5 years my senior, when I was 24. We had a daughter and a son. Our daughter Olivia is now 27. She married a guy she had been dating since high school and is now busy raising her kids. Our son Kyle is 25 and is set to get married next month. Both our children are starting their own happy lives, and I finally felt a sense of relief, like my parenting duties were truly winding down. But there's a bit of unease. It's about Kyle's fiancée, Allison. Allison and Kyle started dating about a year ago. But right after they began dating, Allison practically moved in with us. There was no formal introduction when we first met. Before I knew it, she was staying in Kyle's room, and naturally joined Kyle at the dining table, eating the meals I prepared. At first, thinking we might get along, I struck up a conversation with Allison during one of our meals. Allison, when do you have a day off? How about we cook together next time? At that point, I somehow sensed that Kyle would end up marrying Allison, so I asked. I thought building a comfortable relationship where she didn't feel obligated around us was best. But my concern seemed nothing but a nuisance to Allison. A day off to do chores? Me? Allison responded grumpily and fell silent. Mom, Allison isn't my wife yet. It's insane to make her do chores. Kyle also got angry and blamed me. I didn't mean it like that. I just thought it'd be nice to do something together. I'm sorry. Everyone wants to relax on their days off, right? I hastily apologized and chuckled, but Allison's sullen expression never cleared. But with the wedding set, Allison was becoming part of our family. It seemed there were disagreements between the two during wedding preparations, as I could hear them arguing from Kyle's room, but somehow, they were making progress. Despite my expectations of them moving out after getting married, it seemed they intended to continue living with us, so not much would change. The wedding went off without any major issues. However, I learned then that Allison had quit her job. I thought it would have been nice to know that beforehand, as I kept smiling throughout the wedding. But on the flip side, maybe this meant she'd start pitching in with the household chores. After things settled post-wedding, I approached her about the household duties. Allison, I'd like you to start helping with the chores, just with what you can handle for now. It's also so you can quickly learn where everything is. It's for your own convenience too. But Allison didn't seem to change after the marriage. She just wore the same displeased expression in response to my words. Mom, you're rushing things. We're still newlyweds. Newlyweds, sure, but you've been living in this house for a year now. I'm not asking you to do everything all at once. You've quit your job, so I'd think you'd have some time for chores. Allison's sullen face and Kyle's reproachful words irked me, and I responded a bit sharply. Kyle is working too. But he hasn't contributed a single dollar to the household. And of course, that didn't change after Allison moved in. Kyle looked awkwardly at Allison in response to my words, but Allison just kept her face stern and glared at me. Well, you can start with vacuuming or cleaning the shower room. We're family now, so let's cooperate. That's what Michelle is saying. Morgan backed me up, speaking to Kyle and Allison. With Morgan's support, I thought things would start to improve, but I was perhaps too optimistic. The next day, Kyle and Allison began treating me as if I were invisible. As for Allison helping with the chores, not really. At most, she started putting away their laundry after I washed and cleaned it. Of course, Morgan was just as perplexed about it as I was. I can't understand what these fools are thinking. I'll talk to Kyle about it. And he did talk to Kyle. However, Allison doesn't want to talk to Michelle, was the reply I got, and it just added to my frustrations. Of course, during all this, Morgan had suggested they move out and try living on their own. But Kyle rejected this idea, saying it would be a waste of money. He doesn't seem to realize that living in your parents' home isn't meant to be free. Kyle and Allison continued their usual ways, never cleaning or tidying up. Kyle, please tidy up a bit. Allison, could you help with preparing the meal? Kyle, look at this video, it's hilarious. Even when I spoke, Allison wouldn't take her eyes off her mobile phone. Instead, she blatantly ignored me. But if I gave up now, it would be the end of us as a family. Morgan told me to just let it be, but I kept trying to communicate. However, 3 months of being ignored by Kyle and Allison took its toll, and the daily stress made me ill. I couldn't get up due to severe dizziness and a headache, and I couldn't do the cleaning or laundry. Just take it easy and rest. You need a break once in a while, Morgan said with a smile before leaving for work, and I decided to take his advice and rest. What the heck? No cleaning done? But I was awakened by Allison's loud voice. What? No breakfast either? Some housewife mom is. I get lectured, yet LOL, which mouth is she talking out of? It seemed Kyle and Allison had woken up. They spoke ill of me loudly enough for me to hear, laughing boisterously. Tears welled up in my eyes. I didn't want to cry out of frustration, but it seemed like I had been pushing myself too much. And then it was evening that day. After resting the whole day, I got a call from Morgan. Michelle, how are you feeling? Sorry, I said I'd bring dinner, but some urgent work came up, and I won't be home until after 8 p.m. Oh, is that so? Sorry for making you worry. I'm feeling a bit better, so it's okay. I'll try to get home as soon as I can. Just rest up, Morgan said and hung up the phone. He must have been in a hurry, taking the time to call amidst his busy schedule. I'm truly grateful that Morgan is always on my side. As Morgan suggested, I decided to rest up and wait for him to come home. I stepped out of the room a bit. And I was shocked when I passed through the living room. Candy wrappers and pizza boxes were scattered around, left as they were. Pajamas were thrown on the sofa, left where they were taken off, and there was no sign of vacuuming. Kyle was at work, so it must have been Allison's doing. Just then, Kyle came home. He sighed with a look of annoyance when he saw me. You're back. I greeted him, but no response. Allison, sensing Kyle's return, came down from the upstairs. And just like Kyle, she sighed with annoyance upon seeing me. Allison, please tidy up, I said, but of course, Allison ignored me as usual. Time passed, and the living room remained a mess. With a resigned look on my face, knowing that my words were futile, I stepped into the room. Hey, Mom. What about dinner? Kyle spoke to me for the first time in months. But of course, I didn't feel like responding. Hey, ignoring me? That's pretty rude. Kyle snapped at my silence. Then, Allison looked at me and said, Finished cleaning yet? You better hurry up or Morgan will be back. She said this, mocking me, laughing as she stood in the cluttered living room. What kind of people are they? They probably can't even imagine that I fell ill because of Kyle and Allison. Seeing me stunned, the two of them laughed, and I reached my breaking point. From that day on, I decided to completely ignore the two of them. I used to do their laundry and cook for them, but not anymore. I told Morgan about this decision along with the day's events last night. Morgan was frowning, arms crossed, but he said I could do as I pleased. So today, I prepared dinner just for Morgan and myself and set the table.
What do you mean there's no food for us? Is this some kind of harassment? That's really mean.
Kyle was furious as soon as he saw the dining table. Allison seemed angry too. But I had no intention of responding. Coincidentally, it was Kyle's favorite gratin since childhood, but I doubt I'll ever make it for him again. Morgan didn't respond to Kyle or Allison's words either. Seeing our reaction, Kyle clicked his tongue and headed to the kitchen to search for food. That's when Morgan spoke up.
That instant ramen costs $3 a piece.
Hearing that, Kyle looked up.
What?
He exclaimed.
What do you mean?
It means exactly that.
It's bought with my money, Michelle got it. If you're not going to do chores or contribute to living expenses, then pay for each item.
I was surprised. Morgan is very kind. He's always been that way, both towards me and the kids. I appreciated him getting angry after yesterday's talk, but I didn't expect him to be this strict with Kyle.
Using the shower is $5 per person, and sleeping here is $10 per night. If you want Michelle to cook for you, it's $8 per meal. I have more to say, but if you can't cooperate as a family, at least pay those amounts.
Kyle clicked his tongue at Morgan's words and threw the instant ramen he was holding in frustration. Allison then spoke up.
Are you serious? Charging your own family money?
But Morgan calmly responded.
It's Kyle and Allison who've been exploiting the family without contributing. Michelle and I have said this countless times. We even suggested dissolving the cohabitation. If you still want to live here, then it's only fair to pay the equivalent value.
Allison was speechless, probably unable to refute his logic. But she bit her lip.
You can use the kitchen and fridge. For now, you don't have to pay utilities. Just make sure you clean up after yourself. And buy your own groceries.
Kyle was red with anger. But like Allison, he seemed unable to say anything in response.
This is ridiculous. I can't believe this. Are you kidding me?
They spewed childish insults and, stomping like children, returned to their room. Morgan and I exchanged glances and couldn't help but laugh. But their silence only lasted that day. The next day, they resumed using the shower and staying overnight as if nothing had changed. Allison showed no signs of cooking, and the frozen food and instant noodles I bought kept disappearing. Of course, they still hadn't paid a dime. I didn't want to talk to them anymore, so I said nothing about it. A few days later, Kyle and Allison were set to go on their honeymoon. I had intended to give them some money if we had a good relationship, but that was no longer the case.
Don't expect any souvenirs. I wish we never have to come back.
Their mood seemed lifted by the trip, and they even started complaining to Morgan.
Well, you don't have to come back if you don't want to.
I blurted out unintentionally. Hearing that, Allison glared at me with a sullen face. Despite their own words, I was amazed at their attitude as they left with their large suitcases. Once I confirmed they were away from the house, Morgan and I sprang into action. A moving company would arrive in a few hours. Yes, we decided to move out of the house while they were away. We had reached our limit of tolerance for living together. Despite our efforts, Kyle and Allison only depended on us and took advantage. We thought it better to just get rid of such a house. Kyle and Allison had been ignoring me all along.
Morgan and I decided, ignoring them in return, that this was the best course of action. Our destination was Olivia's house. Olivia, aware of Kyle and Allison's terrible behavior and their treatment and insults towards me, had been inviting us over for a while. But it wasn't satisfying to just leave and let them take over the house. So we came up with a plan to sell the house and land while they were away. The new owner was already decided, and we had made the contract long ago. While our belongings were being moved out, a demolition company also arrived. Everything in Kyle's room was arranged to be disposed of. Important items and a few days' worth of clothes would be with them on their trip, so it wouldn't be a problem if they were gone. With the contracts signed and neighbors notified, we started the demolition as soon as the house was emptied. It was a house we lived in for a long time, but the feeling of liberation far outweighed any sentimentality. Michelle, shall we go? Let's go. Leaving the rest to the demolition crew, Morgan and I got into the car. Together with the moving company, we headed to Olivia's house. And a week later, the place where the house stood was already cleared and turned into an empty lot. And today was the day Kyle and Allison were returning from their trip. As expected, from the evening they arrived at what used to be their home, our phones started ringing. But neither Morgan nor I answered the phone. They must be panicking now that they've found the house gone. Soon enough, Olivia's phone also started ringing. Of course, it was Kyle. Olivia answered the phone with a smile.
Yes. Olivia, it's terrible. The house is gone.
Kyle's panicked voice from the get-go made me inadvertently laugh. Olivia, with a grin, responded to Kyle.
The house is gone. What do you mean?
Her exaggerated acting made me want to laugh even more.
Anyway, there's nothing here. Dad and Mom are gone too.
Then, from the other end of the line, Allison spoke. Olivia, you know something, don't you? Olivia responded irritably to that.
Allison, even if I did know, why would I have any obligation to tell Kyle and you? I know how you've been troubling Dad and Mom. Wait, so Olivia, you were on their side?
Kyle's words made Olivia laugh. Side? It's just the truth. Morgan intervened just as it seemed the phone call would turn into an argument. After switching the phone from Olivia, he began to speak. Anyway, the house is gone as you see. This means the cohabitation is over.
Dad, how can you do this without consulting us? I'm your son. The house that Grandpa passed down should have been mine to inherit. This is outrageous.
I was flabbergasted by Kyle's words. Morgan, sitting beside me, started to laugh heartily.
What is Kyle talking about? That house and land are in Michelle's name. There's nothing I inherited from Dad to pass on. There's nothing to give to Kyle. What do you mean? That house, Mom's property? I've never heard of that.
Kyle was freaking out on the other end of the phone. He apparently didn't know. That land was bought with the money I saved and invested before I got married. Morgan and I lived in an apartment for a while after getting married, but the investments went well, and the money kept growing. So, before the kids started elementary school, we bought that land and house. Although they are now in a facility, we had even called the in-laws' house to live together when the kids were young. Kyle, having lived in that house since he was little, must have mistakenly thought it was originally owned by Morgan's dad. Of course, we never hid the fact that the house was in my name. Only Olivia knew about it. Kyle and Allison should reflect on the current situation as a result of their presumptions, lack of effort, and not valuing me. Raising your voice will only disturb the neighbors, so find a hotel or sleep outside today, whatever you prefer.
Wait, Dad.
Ignoring Kyle's words, Morgan hung up the phone.
Haha, it's their own fault, isn't it? Olivia was laughing so hard, clutching her stomach. I, too, couldn't help but smile at the thought of the two of them in despair. The next morning, early on, Olivia's house doorbell rang. Predictably, it was Kyle and Allison. Should I handle this? Olivia's husband offered, but Morgan and I shook our heads. We can't impose on you any further. We'll handle it, it's fine. Morgan and I stood at the front door. To avoid disturbing the neighbors, we decided to speak at the entrance. As I unlocked the doorknob turned with incredible force. I braced myself, thinking Kyle would lash out, but Morgan shielded me. Contrary to our expectations, as soon as Kyle burst in, he immediately began apologizing deeply. Dad, Mom, I'm truly sorry. We were wrong. Next to him, Allison, also in tears, sobbed. We never realized how upset Morgan and Michelle were. We meant it as a joke, but we hurt you, and we're truly sorry. Their words only infuriated me more. A joke? You freeloaded for a year and then ignored me for 3 months. You think you can pass that off as a joke? We're apologizing, aren't we? An apology doesn't fix anything. I've warned you both repeatedly. You never listened to any of those warnings. Morgan's shout made Kyle and Allison freeze. Let me make one thing clear. The money I've spent so far has gone to living expenses and tuition. Now, all the property and savings are in Michelle's name. Everything that Kyle and Allison have ignored and made Michelle suffer for is Michelle's. Don't even think about inheriting anything. Kyle and Allison turned pale and started trembling at those words. I had never seen Morgan display such anger. Feeling blessed to have Morgan, who was so fiercely protective, I simultaneously wondered how we ended up raising such a monster like Kyle. I pondered if our parenting was flawed, even though I had thought I gave both Olivia and Kyle the same love and care. It made me think that perhaps there is an inherent nature in people. Kyle and Allison, ejected from Olivia's house, left without the initial vigor, dragging their large suitcases behind them. Apparently, they had splurged on their honeymoon and had no money left even to rent an apartment. They were distributing honeymoon souvenirs while asking friends for money, which I found utterly exasperating. What a miserable couple they were. Kyle and Allison, having lost their home, money, and parents. For now, they seemed to be staying in an internet cafe, but apparently, they once couldn't pay the fee and called Olivia. It's none of my business. Why don't you sell your rings and make some money yourselves? Olivia said this to me, laughing as she recounted pushing them away. I didn't know this, but apparently, Kyle and Allison's wedding rings were from a high-end brand, embedded with diamonds. They could surely pay the rent for an apartment if they sold those, but I can't understand their mentality of begging others without sacrificing anything they own. Olivia said. I certainly agree with that. After that, the calls ceased. They probably did as Olivia suggested, selling rings or bags to get a house. They need to learn the hard work of paying for utilities and doing household chores themselves. Morgan and I continue to live happily at Olivia's house. Morgan seems to enjoy drinking with Olivia's husband, and I thoroughly enjoy my new life playing with grandchildren, having lunch with Olivia, and more. To not trouble Olivia with inheritance issues, I've been paying for living expenses, and we plan to go on many family vacations. Though Morgan and I are still young, we want to spend our twilight years using up our money, leaving behind plenty of joyful memories, ready for our departure to heaven. At my in-laws' house, I end up being treated like a domestic worker, and to add insult to injury, I'm the only one without a fancy steak. I sigh, thinking, not this again. You took my loving son from me after all. Suffering is what you deserve, says my mother-in-law, Laura, making me wonder if I've had enough. While sipping coffee, pondering what to do, my brother-in-law, Brian, looks puzzled and asks, "Aren't you eating? Oh, you don't have a steak." "It's the usual," I reply. Immediately, Brian becomes furious. "My name is Stephanie. I'm a 33-year-old working mother. I've been married to Ronald for 5 years. Not having children yet is a concern, but Ronald's laid-back attitude of, 'It'll happen eventually,' makes it hard to take the next step. Our marriage is neither good nor bad, just average. After 5 years, the honeymoon phase has definitely faded, leaving us in a comfortable yet unexciting relationship. Every year, Ronald's family hosts a gathering of relatives. We avoid busy travel periods like Christmas and summer vacations, opting instead for a warmer time of year. I don't have any complaints about the gathering itself, but how I'm treated there is another story. Ronald has 1 brother and 2 sisters. His brother lives abroad and rarely returns. His sisters are married and live close to the in-laws' house, yet their husbands never attend these gatherings. Perhaps they avoid it out of consideration, which I think is wise. I'd prefer not to go either, but Ronald won't listen to me. "Help Mom out, will you? A lot of people are coming," he says. It's hard to say no when asked for help. But it would be fine if it really was just help. Yet, the reality is far from it. Laura sits in the living room, not moving an inch, happily chatting with relatives she hasn't seen in a while. The few times she speaks to me are to say, "Stephanie, we've run out of snacks. Can you go buy some?" Or, "I'm a bit peckish. Could you make something?" And sometimes even, "I'm a bit busy, so could you also take care of the cleaning and laundry?" I wonder where she finds the time to laugh and eat snacks if she's so busy. Deborah and Emily, my sisters-in-law, are no different. They don't lift a finger, even though they both have young children. Yet, when one of the kids accidentally spills a drink, they say, "Oh dear, look what happened. Stephanie, why weren't you watching the kids?" Blaming me unfairly. Here I am, somehow tasked by Laura to clean the bathroom. How am I supposed to keep an eye on the kids from in there? And what's with them, holding beers in their right hands? By the way, James is quietly munching on snacks with a beer in hand. This is the case with the residents of the in-laws' house, which is a gathering place for relatives, so other relatives naturally use me as a housekeeper. Do this, do that, go shopping, take care of the kids. Yet, not a word of appreciation for me, instead. "You're useless, aren't you?" I'm met with cold stares. But the worst time of all is dinner. At these family gatherings, a high-end steak is always served every year. Laura is the one who orders it. Though expensive doesn't always mean delicious, this place is well known for its tasty food. That's why Laura orders from there, and indeed, the relatives all enjoy it, praising its deliciousness. But I have never once had the chance to eat it. Yes, there's none for me. Only my portion is missing. After running around all day, doing the hardest work. In 5 years of marriage, my portion has never been prepared. "Stephanie, he who does not work shall not eat, right? A worthless wife like you doesn't deserve to eat," Laura says, and then, "Out of pity, though, I brewed this especially for you. Enjoy," handing me a cup of weak-looking coffee. This has been going on for 5 years. I think I've done well to endure it. But enough is enough. No matter what Ronald says, I'm not going to any more family gatherings. That's what I decide. Unfortunately, just as I make this decision, I'm informed that Brian will be attending the next gathering. Brian, living abroad, only returns to America once every few years, and I haven't seen him since our wedding. With Brian coming back, it feels hard to justify not attending. So I reluctantly decide to go. Next time then, I'll skip when Brian isn't there. With this resolve, telling myself it's the last time, I muster up my energy. And on the day of the gathering, "Stephanie, we're running low on drinks. Can you grab some from the fridge?" "Oh no, my daughter just dropped the cake." "Stephanie, clean it up, quick." "What is this?" "Stephanie, these snacks aren't enough. Make something more filling, will you?" A barrage of demands from Laura and Deborah. Even Ronald joins in, saying, "Hey Stephanie, Mom's getting old. Take care of the bathroom cleaning for her. It's just once in a while, so make it sparkle, will you?" Then adding, "Make my whiskey a hot toddy, will you?" So, I'm busily fulfilling each request, one after the other. Meanwhile, Ronald, the in-laws, Deborah, and the other relatives don't lift a finger, enjoying themselves eating, drinking, talking, and playing. I'm starting to get really angry. Should I just throw in the towel and head home? Just when I thought about leaving, Brian arrived at the worst possible timing. "Long time no see, everyone." As Brian entered, the whole place lit up with excitement. Everyone was greeting him, asking if he's been well. And then, drinks started flowing again, and I completely lost my chance to leave. I sighed, resigning myself to the thought that today would be the end of it. And so, I continued to move around, following orders. At one point, while I was preparing snacks in the kitchen, Brian came in. "Stephanie, are you okay? It looks like you're doing everything by yourself," he said with a concerned look. This was the first time anyone at an in-laws house gathering had shown concern for me. I was unexpectedly moved. "Oh, no, it's just..." "I'm happy if everyone's having a good time," I replied. "But you shouldn't have to do everything alone, right? I'll go talk to Mom and the others," he said, about to approach Laura, Deborah, and Emily, but I hurriedly stopped him. I didn't mind clashing with Laura and the others since I didn't plan to come back in the future. However, I felt bad for Brian, who had just returned after a long time, getting into trouble with the family. "I'm fine, really, I'm fine," I insisted, managing to stop Brian. "Are you sure? If you need anything, don't hesitate to tell me," he said before returning to everyone else. Perhaps due to his long time abroad, Brian seemed to have different values from Laura, the relatives, and the rest. And then, I felt a little sad. I wished Ronald, not Brian, had said those words to me. Feeling a tightness in my chest, I clasped my hands in front of me when Laura entered the kitchen. I braced myself, thinking she'd ask me to make something, but instead, she began making a phone call. Apparently to the usual high-end steakhouse. They had a reservation for a large group, but as always, she called on the day to confirm. I could hear Laura's voice as she sat on a kitchen chair, talking. "Around 6 p.m. as usual, please." "Yes, the number of people is correct," she said. The word "number of people" involuntarily made my body react. The number of people, huh? Surely, my portion wouldn't be included again this year. I no longer harbored any expectations. It's become normal for me not to have any. Though honestly, I'd rather just go home if that's the case. I must have been staring at Laura because our eyes met after she hung up the phone. Immediately, Laura smirked maliciously. I'm looking forward to the high-end steak this year." "You like that steak from there too, don't you, Stephanie?" she taunted, knowing full well I've never had it. With a strained smile. "No, I've never had it," I managed to say in response. I didn't dare say more,
fearing worse words might escape. Then, with exaggerated surprise, Laura feigned ignorance.
What, really? You've never had it? Oh dear, that's too bad. But don't worry, you'll get to eat it later.
She patted my shoulder with a smile. Should I hurl a hot, freshly fried potato at that heavily made-up face? Vulgar words nearly slipped out. No, I mustn't stoop to Laura and the others' level, it would only lower my own standards. I must endure, I kept telling myself desperately. Seeing me bite my tongue, a smug smile spread across Laura's face. Ronald is my precious son, you took him from me, so you might as well suffer, she said. By the time I processed her words, Laura had already returned to the living room. That wasn't a misunderstanding, was it? Was Laura intentionally making my life miserable? Because she loves her son too much? While I'm unsure about Deborah and the others, it's clear that Laura is deliberately harassing me.
Unforgivable.
To think someone's hard work is met with not a word of gratitude, but a wish for their suffering. There's no need for me to play the good wife anymore. As I pondered what to do next, I ignored the tasks given to me. Meanwhile, the steakhouse delivered the steaks. Am I the one at fault, automatically set to work despite my irritation? I arranged the steaks and prepared the coffee. Though there are distinctions between adult and children's portions, each person has their steak allotted. However, as expected, I guess, it's another day of there being none in front of me. Thinking it was obvious and turning to Ronald beside me. Isn't there one for you? I found him feigning ignorance. Yes, it was all too blatant. Not just Ronald but James, Deborah, and everyone else seem unaffected by this routine neglect. Laura also put on quite the show, saying,
"Oh dear, I'm so sorry. It seems I forgot Brian was coming back and got the number wrong."
Lies. You were the most excited about Brian's return. Looking around, everyone seemed to be in on it, their smiles thinly veiling their malice. All too aware of Laura's doting on Ronald. Well, if you're a wife, you'll just have to put up with it. Whose voice was that? Probably Laura's brother or some old man. Just then, Brian, who had stepped away for a work call, returned and took his seat. As everyone started eating together, I pondered how to handle the simmering anger. While I drank my hot coffee, Brian, puzzled, asked, "Aren't you eating, Stephanie?" Of course, it's normal to care if only I don't have any. The ones who don't care, except for Brian, are the ones who are strange. Yes, it's always like this, I replied casually, returning to my coffee. What? Mom, where's Stephanie's portion? Surprised, Brian looked at Laura, who feigned trouble. Well, you see, I forgot you were coming back and only ordered the usual number of portions. A blatant lie. She definitely ordered one extra for Brian, not forgetting him. After finishing my coffee, I poured myself another cup.
What? I'm so sorry, Stephanie. I don't mind, so please have my portion.
Caught off guard by his offer, I paused mid-sip. I wasn't the only one who was surprised.
What are you saying? You can eat. It's a rare American steak, after all, something you can't get over there. The taste is top-notch.
But Mom, Stephanie was the one running around doing everything. She should be the one eating it.
It's only natural for a wife. She's the wife, so it's expected of her to work when she's here,
Laura said in a fluster. So, because I'm the wife, working is a given, huh? It was the moment my eyes took on a cold hue. Bang! The table shook, making the coffee nearly topple over. Suddenly, Laura fell silent, and a hush fell over the room.
Brian, Ronald's voice echoed unnaturally in the quiet room. Brian had slammed his fist on the table with such force. Brian, looking down, was an imposing sight to Laura and the relatives, who watched in apprehension. After a moment of silence, "She's expected to what? Eek!" At his unusually low voice, Laura let out a strange cry. Brian glared at Laura from under his brows, and it almost seemed as if sound effects were visible behind him. Or they might actually be visible. So what if she's the wife? Expected to work? And what does that have to do with not having a stake? Well, that's because if she's an inadequate wife, then she doesn't deserve to. Bam! Eek! Laura let out another strange yelp as Brian hit the table again, causing her to lean back. Don't be ridiculous. That's absurdly outdated. This is nothing but harassment towards Stephanie. Yipe! Laura crumpled under Brian's booming voice, the relatives turned pale, and the children were nearly in tears. Amid this, Brian continued. Mom, don't tell me you're harassing her because she's Ronald's wife? That's not. What about you guys? Leaving Laura, who couldn't articulate a denial, Brian turned his gaze to Deborah and Emily, his sisters, who also gasped in fear. I find it hard to believe, but has this been going on for a while? When Laura and the others remained silent, Brian turned to ask me. Without any reason to stay silent or lie, I nodded. Stephanie? Laura panicked, but I ignored her and spoke up. Since I got married 5 years ago, this has been the treatment at every family gathering. I'm treated like a household worker all day, and I've never once had the privilege of enjoying the expensive steak that's always served. It's always I forgot, while Laura and Ronald eat deliciously right in front of me. Ronald, is this true? Huh. Well, yeah, sort of. Overwhelmed by Brian's presence, Ronald turned pale and nodded. You let your wife be treated like this and said nothing. But Mom said a bad wife needs to be disciplined. So, you think Stephanie is a bad wife? What? Well, no, I mean, you're the worst. With that, Brian turned away from Ronald as if there was nothing more to be said. Ronald was pale as a ghost. You all are the worst, Dad too. And you all as well. With that, Brian surveyed the roomful of relatives. No one could retort, all hanging their heads with faces turned blue. Finally, Brian gave Laura one more look, no, a glare. Eek! I know you dote on Ronald. He's the youngest and spoiled, I get that. But this is different. You all, not seeing this as abnormal, are out of your minds. There's a reason for this. That doesn't matter. Just from watching today, I've seen enough. Without waiting for Laura's response, Brian turned to James. It's clear to me now how low you all are. I have no obligation to do anything for such parents anymore. Don't expect any more money from me. What? Voices from the in-laws overlapped in shock. James, in his early 60s and already retired, couldn't make ends meet on his small pension. In these tough times, finding a job at his age was nearly impossible, leaving him unemployed. So, how could they afford such expensive steaks? Yes, it was because of Brian's remittances. Working abroad and single, Brian had a considerable income and was sending a significant amount back home. Hearing that these would cease, Laura's face went white. Wait, please! If you do that, our living expenses. With Dad's retirement money and his pension, you should manage, right? I wasn't sending money for you to lavish on expensive steaks for the whole family. If you have that much leeway, you don't need my help. Not just James and Laura were flustered, but Deborah and Emily as well. Brian will be in trouble without your support. You've been covering the kids' lesson fees. And us too. We were counting on your help for the private elementary school exams. Despite their lamentations, Brian cut them off with a firm, I don't care. No. Deborah and Emily were left to hang their heads in defeat. Then, Brian turned to Ronald. Ronald, I have no intention of employing a man who doesn't cherish his wife. You're fired. What? Ronald's scream was the loudest of all. Indeed, Ronald worked at the Boston branch of a company run by Brian, with a decent salary. I had plans to leave the American operations to you eventually. But a man who can't protect his wife can't protect his employees either. It's a shame. Brian's voice was full of anger, not regret. Wait, Brian. I apologize, so please, anything except firing me. The moment Ronald said this, Brian's expression turned furious. You should be apologizing to Stephanie, not me. Overwhelmed by Brian's fury, Ronald collapsed. Before anyone noticed, the children had been moved to another room, leaving only the adults, now pale and trembling. The premium steak in front of me seemed to be saying, "You're still not eating me," so I took a slice from Ronald's plate. Oh, this is delicious. The steak was so good that I couldn't help but speak out. Indeed, Ronald was enjoying this delicious steak while neglecting me. I see. It's disheartening. My eternal love cooled in an instant. They say a grudge over food is scary, but mine exploded all at once after accumulating. If only Ronald had protected me from Laura's bullying. If only Ronald had said, "Want to share mine?" The situation might have been different. But Ronald did not do that. He simply laughed and silently watched Laura's harassment towards me. Brian looked at me. Stephanie, I'm truly sorry for having such foolish relatives. I'm embarrassed to call them family. I don't know how I can make it up to you, but I'll do what I can. Could you employ me at your company, then? My voice came out quicker than I thought. I had been interested in working for a foreign company, but never made the move. With Ronald being fired, a position would be open. I asked without much hope, but he instantly agreed, sure. Yes. What? Wait, Stephanie. Brian, are you serious? I don't lie. Well, it's okay, I guess. If Stephanie earns a good salary at your place, we'll manage somehow. It seemed Ronald was worried about maintaining our standard of living. Manage somehow with my income? As if that's possible, I retorted. Oh, I'll be divorcing you. As for alimony, I'll claim what I can. Without children, there's not much to claim, but I'll take what I'm entitled to. Again, Ronald exclaimed. What? Brian's words have opened my eyes. I had already decided this would be my last visit here. Divorcing will mean I never have to come here again. I stated flatly, without any inflection. Ronald's face turned from pale to completely white. Is he wearing foundation? I casually turned to James, Laura, Deborah, and Emily. With that, my role as Ronald's wife concludes today. I doubt we'll ever meet again. Goodbye. I said this calmly and stood up. Guess I'll be leaving too. Brian also stood up, prompting a startled Laura to frantically cling to me. Wait, Stephanie, give me a chance to apologize. I was truly wrong. It was just a little jealousy. I won't do it again, so please, forgive me. If you forgive me, I don't think Brian will say anything about stopping the support. Like I'd forgive you, idiot. I didn't yell, nor did I smile and speak in a sarcastic manner. I spoke robotically, with lifeless eyes. Did you know? Sometimes, saying things this way can instill more fear in the other person. Eek! And it worked wonders. Laura let out a strange cry from her throat, dropping her hands to the floor and collapsing. Deborah and Emily were pale, as were the other relatives. And Ronald was ghostly white. Did his soul leave his body? Good day to you all. With a bright smile, I finally left the in-laws' house. Sorry about this, Stephanie. I'll refer you to a lawyer regarding the divorce, Brian said as we left together, apologizing repeatedly. Afterward, the lawyer Brian referred was excellent, ensuring I received proper compensation in the divorce. Ronald, now my ex-husband, whined until the end, but he quieted down when threatened with court. He seemed to really dislike the idea of going to court. After being fired, Ronald struggled with job hunting for a while. Being incompetent, he couldn't find work, and Brian ended up taking care of him. It seemed unlikely he'd find a job easily. He tried working part-time, but eventually ended up unemployed and retreated to his parents' home. James, Laura, Deborah, and the others bombarded me with calls. Apparently, they couldn't reach Brian anymore and wanted me to persuade him to restart the remittances. So, I told them. Like I know, idiots. They were speechless on the other end of the phone. I hung up and blocked their numbers. If they tried calling from another number, I'd consult my lawyer. But I doubted they had the guts for that. As for me, I'm working hard at my new job, embracing a fresh start. The new field was challenging and busy, but my 5 years of enduring harassment and being treated like a domestic worker at the in-laws' house wasn't for nothing. I gradually got the hang of it, thanks to my perseverance. Apparently, Ronald had been quite negligent in his work, relying on his status as the president's brother. The employees, seeing my work ethic, thanked me with tears, saying, "Thank you for coming." While I'm not thinking about remarriage just yet, having just divorced, I do hope to carefully choose someone who truly values their spouse next time. To do that, I need to sharpen my judgment, and so, I continue to work hard every day.